there, welcome to the Middle East video blog. My name is Jay.
My name is Merve.
This is our first episode, and today we're going to talk about an article from the New York Times. You'll see a link right at the bottom there. We suggest that you pause, follow the link, read the article, and then come back. We're going to have a discussion about it, and Merve is going to tell you a little bit of background right now.
Yes, we will summarize the article. It's called Turkey and Iran Signal a Softening of Differences over Syria. And the article is essentially about a meeting that took place last Friday between the two foreign ministers and Turkey's prime minister, where they talked about how the Syrian crisis is increasing the sectarian tensions in the Middle East, and both Iran and Turkey are very concerned about this, and they're willing to cooperate on this issue to make sure they can ease it.
So let's do some background first. We would like to talk about, we're going to frame the Syrian conflict. Some people say civil war, some people say it's a failed state. We're going to call it a proxy battleground. So think about the Cold War and proxy wars like Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan. We're going to say this is a proxy battleground just like those were. It's not exactly a Cold War. There are several regional players that have a stake in Syria.
So there are many aspects through which we can call this a proxy war, but today we're going to look at it from the perspective of Iran and Turkey.
Right. So, for example, there are other interested players. Israel's an interested player. This week, in fact, they were accused of bombing a target in Syria. Saudi Arabia and Qatar are obviously also players. Egypt. So we're not going to talk about those. We're just going to focus on the Syrian crisis from the perspective of Turkey and Iran.
Yes, and I think the question that we want to focus on is that given that Syria is today a proxy war for Iran and Turkey, in that Iran has been a full supporter of the Shiite Assad regime, both directly helping them and through via Hezbollah, and Turkey has been directly helping some of the rebels, especially the Sunni Muslim Brotherhood type faction of the rebels. How can such a cooperation really take place between the two?
Right, so in the article, and what happened in real life, the foreign ministers got together, they said, okay, we've disagreed about this in the past. Turkey supports Sunnis, Iran supports Shias, but we can cooperate. So let's critically examine that. Can they actually cooperate? Are their interests actually aligned? Why don't you start by talking about Turkey?
So I think, what we need to see is what is the implications of rising sectarian tensions in the Middle East for both Turkey and Iran. And for Turkey, we can look at it through two separate realms, I will say. One would be, what are Turkey's regional interests in the Middle East? And if we think of it that way, then Turkey has been, especially after the Arab Spring, since we have in Turkey an Islamist-rooted Justice and Development Party governing, they seem to have an interest in promoting the Muslim Brotherhood type Sunni democratic regimes all around the region. We've seen this with the Arab Spring, how they have supported the Morsi government in Egypt, and they've done the same for Libya and Tunisia, and they still have really great relations with the Libyan and Tunisian governments, especially because of that. So we
can call that political Islam.
Yes, political Islam, but it's very different than, for example, Saudi Arabia's interest, especially if we look at Syria. So where one, looking at the Arab Spring, does not want a democratic change in the Middle East. Turkey does want this, but it does also want it with who they support, with the factions they support. So that would be like the more Sunni Muslim Brotherhood.
So they both want change, but they want different outcomes.
Yes, so how does this relate to Iran? Iran, on the other hand, I think they're supporting.
I'll take it from here.
Yeah.
So Iran is, some people call it a theocracy.
Yeah.
Okay? And
some people
call it a theocracy. I don't personally agree with that. They call it a theocracy. The point is, religion and government are basically the same thing. The clerics and the mullahs and the ayatollahs, they hold a lot of power in Iran. So the religious establishment is very politically powerful. But Islam, as we know, breaks down into two primary groups, Sunni and Shia. Mm-hmm. Iran falls under the Shia category, which means that Iran in Syria supports the Shiites.
But is it just Syria, or what is the regional?
It's exactly. So anywhere most places that you'll find Shiites, Iran will support them. So the big example, Hezbollah.
Of course, in Lebanon.
They're a terrorist organization. Some consider them to be like a mafia organization because they do. They're part of the government. They're a government in Lebanon. They provide water, food subsidy programs. They do help the people, but
they're political actors
right.
in Lebanon.
They're kind of thugs, the way that think of maybe a drug cartel in Latin America. Yeah, they do a lot of bad things and they launder a lot of dirty money, but they also understand that they need to keep the local population happy.
And they do in a way, and that's why they're successful.
That's why they won an election. They're a mafia group, but they won an election. Anyway, Iran supports them because of a similar ideology, supporting, in some respects, radical aspects of Shia Islam. You see other examples of Iran supporting Shiite populations. Look at Bahrain. Okay, huge Shia population in Bahrain, ruled by a tiny Sunni monarchy that's supported by Saudi Arabia, and Iran supports the Shiites. The question, though, see, religion is it's not the trump card. The trump card for Iran is, what's in my best interest?
And how can you get more influence?
Exactly.
Which is the same thing for Turkey. I mean, why does the Turkish government, let's say, support these like-minded figures? Because they want to be able to be a guide for them in the region, and they want respect, and they want more power, they want more influence. And how do you get that? If you have like-minded governments installed in other countries around you, then you can essentially be a leader in the region.
And this is true for any region in the world, and even for the world as a whole. America follows this thinking, Russia follows this thinking, China follows this thinking. To finish and wrap up my point about Iran, Hezbollah is their primary concern because they share Shia ideology and they also share political ideology. They're very anti-Israel, for example. So when it comes to the Syrian crisis, Syria is an important point along a route from Iran through Syria to Lebanon and Hezbollah. So that way they can fight Israel there. And wherever else Iran wants them to fight. You can think of Hezbollah like a tentacle on an octopus, and Iran is the head of the octopus. So Syria is very important. I say I'm going to throw this out there. They don't really care about Assad. They don't really care about Syria. They care about maintaining a constant way to support Hezbollah. So if they are going to find some other alternative that doesn't include Assad in the final solution for Syria, they'll take it as long as they can continue to support Hezbollah in the way that they currently are doing.
Would you say that the reason why the Iranian government is supporting the Assad regime in Syria is because the Syrians are aiding Hezbollah? Or is it vice versa?
No. It's Syria is a means to an end.
I see.
If they can fly, it's as simple as, can I land an airplane in your airport that has weapons for Hezbollah? And get fuel and take off again and go to Lebanon? Or can I put it on a train? Or can I put it in a car? Can I put money in your bank and then from your bank transfer it to Hezbollah? It's as simple as that. Keep in mind also that Iraq is very important right now because Iraq is governed by Shiites. Maliki is a Shiite and he shares religion with Iran. Now they don't always agree, okay? But if it becomes the case that Iran can wield enough influence in Iraq and use Iraq as a means of transportation and a tunnel, a pipeline to get their weapons and money through Iraq to Lebanon, then their reliance on Syria will diminish. And if they don't need Syria, they don't need Assad, it's going to be a waste of money for them to keep fighting in Syria because it's a lot of money. Look, in October of 2012, so almost exactly a year ago, Iran sent $10 billion to the Syrian government.
And that's a huge proportion considering how Iran's economy is doing today.
Exactly. So yes, Iran's economy is big. Okay, according to the World Bank, today Iran is the second largest economy in the Middle East, and it's at $484 billion US. That's the size of their economy. So $10 billion, all right, that's not a lot when you're talking about $484 billion. But Iran's inflation rate right now is 39%, according to the World Bank.
So considering that's a huge support to
it's a lot of
foreign
support.
Government.
It's money that could be spent at home. It's money that could be spent giving goods and services to your population. It's money that could be spent improving your economy, I guess, or even just for schools. whatever it is, that's $10 billion that the Iranians didn't get from their government because it went to Syria instead.
Absolutely, but I want to take this conversation back to how the Syrian crisis, increasing sectarian tensions in the region, is affecting Turkey and Iran. They say that this is a problem and they want to cooperate on this, but the question is, really, let's think of the geopolitical interests of these countries. Is it really a problem for them, the fact that the crisis is increasing sectarian tensions? I mean, clearly, I think we both have been talking about this now for a while, that both for Turkey and Iran, it seems like the fact that in the region this is increasing is almost into their benefit. You know, that they're able to point to each other and say that, see, in Syria we have to get involved, because if we don't get involved, Turkey can say, because Iran is now and Hezbollah are now helping, and this is fueling the sectarian tensions. And Iran can say the same thing about Saudi Arabia and Turkey and Qatar with these efforts. And so it almost seems like a really good narrative to use to promote your own interests. It's very good propaganda.
So I write about this in an article that I recently put out there. There's a subsection. It's about in Iran and basically Iran's political economy, with Rouhani on the one side and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps on the other. There's a subsection called Hugging the Boogeyman. I have this theory called the Boogeyman theory. Okay, here's what it says. It says that if you're a leader in Iran, or if you're a leader in any country, and if you can point the finger and say, look over there, that's a problem, focus on that problem, population, then they're not going to focus on you, and they're less critical of you, and you're more stable. So and this is not just a Middle East phenomenon, this is how leaders gain stability. So for example, if the Iranian government has a lot of tension right now. There's a lot of question about whether or not the population is going to maybe revolt one day. There's a lot of question about whether Rouhani can solve all these problems. It's a lot easier for them to say, yeah, let's not talk about inside Iran, let's talk about outside Iran.
Yeah, actually, this is a very interesting point, because now we can maybe come back to the domestic politics. So we explained sort of how the fact that sectarian tensions are rising relates to the regional aspirations of these two countries, but how does it affect the domestic politics? I mean, for Iran, I want to talk about Turkey in this, because Turkey actually has a certain population called the Alevi population, which is not the same at all as the Alawites in Syria, but they are both offshoots of Shiite Islam.
So the Alevis are in Turkey.
Yes.
And the Alawites
are in Syria. Turkey also has a Syriac Alawite population there, but what's more important, I guess, is that most of these Alevis and Alawites who are living in Turkey, who identify more with the Assad regime and the Shiite sect than they do with especially the Turkish government right now, since they are a very Sunni Islam-rooted government. So this is becoming a problem for them, the Syrian crisis, because the more the refugees come to Turkey, the refugees that are coming are mostly Sunni, and so it's creating a lot of tension in the southeast border provinces of Turkey with Syria, that the population there that was Alawite and Alevi are now facing this major influx of Sunni Syrians.
And it's like a refugee crisis.
It is. It's an actual refugee crisis. Obviously, it's not as big as it is in Lebanon or Jordan, because Turkey or Iraq, because Turkey has much bigger population, more stable economy, and more stable political system. It's not as big of a problem, but it is becoming a problem for the government, especially because now we're seeing a lot of protests going on for the government's propaganda and how they've been their Syria policy in general, because these people are very worried about how the tensions are rising now in those areas. So I don't really know how the Turkish government is going to be able to balance its regional interests and domestic interests in that sense. If you look at it from a sectarian tension point of view, And I don't know how, perhaps the cooperation with Iran is now coming after the domestic challenges
Right,
Turkey
okay,
is
so
facing
right.
because
So
of this.
Syria is a sectarian conflict. Turkey very much took a side early on and has
Yes.
supported that side. But then as the conflict continues, refugees start pouring over, and now all of a sudden people in Turkey are mad at the government because of the sectarian conflict.
Exactly.
So it's now politically expensive
For them,
for Turkey
and the
to
tide is
support.
changing, essentially.
Right. I would say it's politically expensive for Turkey to support sectarian strife.
And it's also economically, fiscally expensive for Turkey to
Mhm.
go against Iran in a place like Syria. So it makes sense for them to want to cooperate. I mean, Turkey, about 40% of Turkey's oil imports come from Iran. So Turkey now, today, I think, we import about 5 million barrels. Let me
Did
see.
you write it
Sorry,
down?
I wrote it down. Yes, 5 million metric tons a year from Iran, and this has been decreasing lately because of in the past few years because of the sanctions,
Oh, okay.
the international sanctions. But they've been saying repeatedly that in 2014 they have no intentions of cutting it further down because this is the most they can cut it down to. They really need this oil, so they really need to have some sort of cooperation with Iran. I mean, Turkey cannot afford to strain their ties, that's why.
You can't risk your oil relationships. I mean, look at this. It's the same reason why America has such a strong relationship with Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
That's where your oil's coming from. You can't really be fighting a proxy war with that country.
No, I mean, the oil that's coming into Turkey from Iran is very important. What might change is that they've been saying if Iraq is able to produce more output, then Turkey might switch into that as opposed to Iran. And now I think we're seeing, especially this comes to the Kurdish issue. So the Kurdish part of Iraq now, they're building a second oil pipeline that's going to go through Turkey.
So I tell you what, look, this is a fascinating conversation.
But that's different.
It's a different conversation. The Kurdish angle for Turkey-Iraq relations, very different topic.
We don't want to get into
We'll
that.
talk about it in a different episode.
But I think what's important is that Turkey and Iran, I mean, from Turkish side of point of view, there is an incentive to cooperate with Iran and maybe use the rhetoric that the sectarian tensions are rising and we both don't like it as a way to say, you know what, maybe we shouldn't be having a proxy war in Syria.
Right.
It does make sense, but how is that really feasible? I'm not sure, considering Iran and Turkey's history.
I think, okay, look, my concluding thought would be these are two of the three historical regional powers in the Middle East.
Yes.
Ottoman Empire, Persian dynasties, hundreds of years, Egyptian pharaohs, okay, dating all the way back then. This is a long timeline. These are the three major, we both agree on this, they're the three major peoples in the Middle East in terms of being politically powerful and having influence throughout the entire region. Turkey and Iran are two of the three.
Mm-hmm.
They have learned over hundreds and hundreds of years strategy.
Mm-hmm.
This means they're always going to do what's in their best interest, and they have lots of practice knowing what's in their best interest and executing on that. So in the beginning, it was in their interest to increase the sectarian tensions. For Turkey, it's not anymore.
No. Well, domestically.
Exactly, it's a domestic political cost. For Iran doesn't face the same kind of problems. Iran doesn't really have a domestic cost to the Syrian crisis. I will say this. I will say that Rouhani was elected primarily on his Syria platform. He said, elect me, I will solve the economy, I'll solve the sanctions, and I will win in Syria. That's what Rouhani said. So, Rouhani needs a victory in Syria. What does that look like? They can spin it however they want.
Yeah, what does that mean to have victory in Syria?
That's a talk for a different time.
Okay.
For now, I'm saying both Turkey and Iran are historic regional powers. They're going to do what's in their best interest. Turkey's interests in Syria have changed. Sectarianism is no longer in their interests because it's a
But they also
cost.
do still say that they absolutely want Assad to go. So they're not willing to give up on that. and neither is Iran in
It's,
keeping it intact. I think they are thinking of giving some concessions where they're like, if at least there is a certain institutional power linked to the Assad regime, then we'll be fine with it. But I think our conclusion here is that they say it's great that they say they want to cooperate and reduce the sectarian tensions and try to figure out a middle ground.
I think Turkey needs the cooperation more than Iran does.
Perhaps you're right. I think Turkey is now more and more realizing that it's pursuing this policy by itself in Syria is not really helping, especially since now that there's not as much support from the United States and the West, and the world is more concentrated on the Geneva talks. So Turkey is, I think, trying to maybe slowly change its rhetoric on Syria, although it won't probably completely give up on it. We'll see what happens, but I don't know how optimistic either of us are.
Hey, we'll see what happens.
But we hope that we've been able to help you think these issues through from certain perspectives.
Please, look down if you have feedback. Leave a comment. If you have another article, if you want to see us talk about something, if you read something and you think, hey, I'd love to hear what Jay and Merve think about this, you can email us at middleeastvideoblog@gmail.com. And if we like it, we'll do the rest. Just be sure to include some sort of article so that, just like this time, we had the article that was our jumping off point. Send us another article from a credible source. And we'll look, if we like it, we'll look into it.
And please don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, Middle East Video Blog.
Here are all the links.
Well, okay. I think this was our first episode, so we hope
we don't know how to end. And goodbye.
Great. Goodbye.